Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very, very accomplished entrepreneur, a fellow member of the YPO from Chicago, USA, Mr. Mike Maddock. Mike, welcome to the show.
Ashutosh, it's an honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike is the founder of Maddock Douglas, Flourish Forums, and McGuffin Creative Group. He's an entrepreneur, a keynote speaker. He's a best-selling author, and we can see his books behind him, and a CEO coach. He's also, as I mentioned, a member of the YPO, and it's always a pleasure to speak to a fellow YPO member. So, Mike, let's start by asking you a simple question. Tell me about your own journey in brief.
My journey started by working for an entrepreneur, and then another entrepreneur, and then another entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. It was an accident, a happy accident. I got a chance to see that entrepreneurship really has a lot more to do with grit and determination than intelligence. And I was just lucky enough to see behind the curtain and see that entrepreneurs are just people that take risks and try things and experiment and make enough mistakes quickly that eventually they find success.
Very interesting. You call yourself an idea monkey. Help me understand this and give me an example.
So, I'm very divergent. I've always been creative. I got in trouble at school a lot. I was the kid that got in trouble for talking too much and doodling and just not paying attention. And I like ideas. And in my first company, I remember the president of the company said, Hey, idea monkey, get in here. I need an idea.
Okay.
And he was teasing me because I always had so many ideas. It's always idea.
Amazing.
But I took it as a big compliment, that he called me an idea monkey. So I wrote a book called Free the Idea Monkey to focus on what matters most, which is about how people that have lots of ideas, when they get together with a partner who's really good at executing ideas, the world changes.
Fascinating. So, Mike, I'd like to talk to you about your businesses in the order in which you started. Let's start with Maddock Douglas.
Okay. Maddock Douglas, the tagline for Maddock Douglas should have been, sure, we can do that too, because it started as a creative services firm, and we started by doing logos and brochures and advertisements. And our first client was a coffee company. Our second client was a hospital. Mm-hmm. And eventually it became the second largest privately owned creative services firm in Chicago, in the Chicago area. Mm-hmm. My background is in design. I studied design and then business in school. Mm-hmm. So I'm a creative. And about 20 years ago, we began working in ideation. We started, working on new product development. And I had this, panacea moment where I decided that if we could be better at understanding what consumers actually wanted and help invent new products and services that they were asking for, that it would be easier to advertise and market them. So we pivoted and became a innovation consulting firm, and it just completely transformed our business.
Amazing. And before I go further, how do you define innovation?
Okay, so innovation, if it was a Venn diagram, 3 circles put together, innovation is first the insight, understanding what the world wants or needs, and then and only then an idea that solves that need. So it can be a product or a service or a business model. You can invent it, you can acquire it, you can learn how to do it. And then finally, the last circle is the experience that makes people go, oh my gosh, you listened to me, and thank you, I'll pay you this much for it. So most people confuse invention with innovation. And remember the 3 circles. First, insight. Here's what the world needs. Yep. Second, idea. And then third, experience. Invention is starting with the idea and looking for someone that wants it. And lots of entrepreneurs get into trouble. Lots of companies get into trouble by inventing instead of innovating. They don't understand the need before they start coming up with ideas.
Fascinating. And based on all the work that you do, can you tell me a few things that keep companies from being innovative?
Sure. The first one is the biggest one is expertise. My favorite saying is you can't read the label when you're sitting inside the jar. That's a different way to think about the expertise trap. There are famous companies that, they know what their customers want. They know what's legal. They know what they've tried in the past. They know what they can afford. They know what the boss wants. They know. And and they can't, that keeps them from seeing possibility when it's walking right in front of them. This is actually the entrepreneurial advantage, because there's a company called Napster that blew up the recording industry, and it was started by a 16-year-old kid. And he wasn't trying to blow up anything. He was just trying to solve a problem. So a Napster moment is when someone with no business being in your business comes along and puts you out of business. And the way they do that is they're not experts. They just have a need that the establishment refuses to recognize.
Amazing. So my next question is that if, Mike, you were the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, what were 3 things you would do to make your company immediately more innovative?
The first thing I do is hire an outsider to run innovation. I just talked about the Napster moment. You want someone that is not an expert, that can walk into a room and say, how come no one's talking about the elephant in the room? It's this glaring problem in the industry that no one's recognizing. Why don't we take that on? Which leads to the second thing. Embrace the hate to innovate is one of my favorite sayings. What happens is the more someone hates something about your product, your industry, the more likely it is that you're going to be disrupted, because industries make excuses about things that their customers hate about them. Well, that's what the law says, or that's the way it's always been done, or you don't understand what you really need. We do. And so an outsider can walk in and say, God, I've always hated this about the industry. Why don't we fix that? So they see that hate. And then the second thing is they're willing to take it on. They're like, well, okay, but what if we changed it? And if you can disrupt yourself by recognizing what people really hate about you, which is hard to do. It's hard to go and ask your customers, and what are we bad at doing? What do you hate about us? But if you can do that, you'll be able to pivot and disrupt yourself. And then the final thing is to use a portfolio strategy. I've written about it, but there's 4 different types of innovation, and you should invest in each one of them. Most people make the mistake of investing in these big, wild ideas, and that's a risky strategy. Just like you invest your money, you want to invest prudently into different types of innovation.
Very interesting. So now let's move to your next company, which is McGuffin Creative Group. Tell me about this and how it came to be.
Well, there's a famous film called Jerry Maguire. And there's a scene in the film where he says he has this big idea, and he walks in and says, I'm starting a new company. Who's with me? And he grabs the fishbowl, and one person leaves with him. And that was kind of how McGuffin started. When we pivoted Maddock Douglas to be an innovation firm, I said, this is what we're going to be when we grow up. But we had some people that worked on our team who didn't want to do that. So I went to them and said, okay, well, tomorrow, let's talk about starting a new company, and you can run it. And so McGuffin Creative Group is a marketing communications firm in Chicago that focuses primarily on healthcare and financial services. And it's run by people that used to work with me at another company, wonderful people, incredibly talented people.
Wow. And given the fact that you built McGuffin Creative as a company that supports brands, my next question logically is, what goes into building a successful brand? And
well, so I should ask you that, actually, Coach, because you're an expert in this. So I know that I feel like I'm speaking to the master here.
No.
But I think brand building is very similar to that Venn diagram. Innovation, it's insight followed by idea followed by experience. And I think the best brands understand deeply their customers. And by responding to their needs, they're keeping the right promises at the right time. And so what happens is a brand that has a really loyal customer base feels understood and heard by them, because that company keeps keeping promises, keeping the promises that they want kept at the right time. And as the needs of their consumers shift, they understand those, and they deliver new services and new products that delight those customers. So that I think the key to a great brand is deeply understanding your customers' needs and responding to them.
Very interesting. And yet, one of the things that's often said about brands is that brands are like children. You've got to keep on investing in them, nurturing them as they grow. But I'd love to get your perspective. There are brands that companies like Procter & Gamble have, which have survived for 100 years. And there are others that come and, like a flash in the pan, they die within a few years. What, in your view, is the reason, or how do brands stay relevant for a long period of time?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And that's a deep question, and I hate to answer it quickly without thinking deeply about it. I think there's a resonance with brands. Like this brand understands me. This brand represents me. This brand is part of how I want to show up and be seen. And I think brands make choices about who they are for and who they're not for.
Correct.
There's a famous clothing brand in Patagonia that has literally sued the U.S. government for making environmental decisions that they were against. Now that's a bold decision, because they do outdoor clothing, and hunters wear outdoor clothing.
Correct.
So by saying, listen, we're going to piss off half of the world by making this decision, but it's okay, because this is what we are, this is who we are, and this is who we stand for. That creates loyalty with the people who said, yeah, that's why that brand represents me. So it's courageous. They deeply understand what they stand for, who they stand for. And, as long as there are enough of those people, those brands last for a long time.
Correct. Well said. What a great response. Thank you. So now let's talk about your latest company, Flourish Forums. But before we get in that, tell me what a forum is, and then tell me the origin of Flourish Forums.
Thank you for the question. So there are a lot. Forum's a big word, and people have mastermind groups and industry groups and peer groups. My definition of a forum is informed by EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, the Young Presidents Organization, Vistage. A forum is a group of people who get together, who are peers, and talk about their most pressing issues. And those issues, if you're an entrepreneur, you put all your issues in a blender. So they're personal issues, they're business issues, but it's a safe place where you can admit that you can't solve a problem amongst peers who are willing to admit the same thing and share their wisdom, their experience in a way that might make you see the problem differently. That's where help breakthroughs happen. And I've been in a forum for EO for 23 years, for YPO for 15 years. Those are my second forums. These are my brothers and sisters. They have carried me through the most difficult business and life issues that I've had. I just love my forum mates. And there's no intentionality in most forums, which is to say that it's like throwing a bunch of ingredients into a pot of water and hoping the soup tastes good. It usually doesn't. So Flourish Forums is intentional. I interview peers, people that have P&L leadership or responsibility, and then I put them in one of 6 seats so that the forums are engineered so that people see things differently. They see the problems differently. And that's how Flourish Forums is different than other forums.
Fabulous. And, from a YPO perspective, I do understand forums, and I've been a part of a forum, one for 30 years and one for 17, 18 years, which is an international forum that I have. But my next question to you, Mike, is that who needs to be in a forum, and how can they benefit?
Well, I think the way I position Flourish Forums is it's a fast growth advisory board. And I believe every leader should be in a forum. They should have a framework, some kind of unifying framework that brings their leaders together to operate a company, and at least one coach. I think, and the reason I say that is because the people that I respect most in the world have 2 forums and 3 coaches, and and a really solid framework. Correct. And I see them growing. I like to say the crown is heavy. It's a very difficult spot to be running a company. You can't tell your family about your problems because they sound like rich person problems. You can't tell your high school or college, university buddies because they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Company Owner. But these are real issues. And so a forum allows you to come to a safe place and reveal what you can't figure out. And Flourish Forums are virtual. So the beauty is I have people in different countries and different forums. So you get the diversity of thinking very quickly. It's hard to construct by getting in a car and trying to find people in your neighborhood that think differently.
Correct. Well said. And based on all the experiences that you've had with Flourish Forums, what are some of the challenges leaders face that are being addressed through these forums?
So topical problems like supply chain, the young people in my company, the youngest people in my company want to come into work. The millennials don't want to come into work. The older people want to come into work. How do we hold our culture in a virtual place, in a virtual space? Those are some recent things. But then there are things like life transition. How do you move from being the president to the CEO to the chairman? How do you take on your biggest competitor? What happens when your best employee leaves? What happens when your worst employee won't leave? I mean, all the things that happen in business. And then add to that, my youngest son is having trouble in school. He has anxiety, like all these things that are life issues that can be that when viewed differently. And someone says, yeah, I had the same issue, but I looked at it differently, and here's my experience. You have these breakthroughs that are amazing.
Well said. And my last question on forum, and then I want to move to your books. How does forum help in resolution of conflicts?
But so it's not an accountability group.
Yeah.
It is. We share experience. We don't give advice. So it's kind of the gestalt, here's my experience, and maybe it's useful for you.
Yeah.
Because if you tell people what to do and they don't do it, you're mad at them. If you tell people what to do and they do it and it doesn't work out, they're mad at you. So you don't do that.
Yeah.
And if someone has one other thing, which is, it's a good question. If everyone's getting along in your forum, it's a bad forum. Because we like being around people that agree with us, see the world the same way, but that's not how you learn. You have to be around people that say,
absolutely.
Really?
Yeah.
And so I think each forum has a moderator that stands in between that tension and makes meaning out of the tension. And each forum has an executive coach that does the same. So real time, we're making positive goodness out of tension.
Wonderful, thank you. So now I'm going to move to your books. I see 3 books behind you, but I can only read the title of one, which is brand new. The other 2 titles I can't read from here. But tell me about your books.
Okay, so brand new is about the process of innovation. It's about the innovation paradox. We did a bunch of research. The innovation paradox is the harder companies try to innovate, the worse they get at it. That's true. And weirdly, it's gotten worse over the last 10 years, according to new research by Accenture.
Yeah.
So that's the process of innovation. The book you don't see is called Flirting with the Uninterested, Innovating in a Sold Not Bought Category, which is about financial services. And that was written by Maria Ferrante Shepis and myself. She's the president of one of my companies. Wonderful book if you're in insurance or financial services. And then Free the Idea Monkey, I mentioned earlier, the tension between Roy and Walt Disney, the visionary leader and the operator, the idea monkey and the ringleader. And my latest book is called Plan D. Plan D is about disruptors, and it speaks to 8 different superhero powers that the most disruptive leaders have and how you can use them too.
Fabulous. So I'm going to ask all our viewers and listeners to go and check out Mike Maddock's book on Amazon and other platforms. If I've got them all right, one is brand new. The second one you said is Flirting with the Uninterested. The third one you said was Idea Monkey. And the fourth one is Plan D. So please go and check out Mike's books. I'm going to check them out myself. And Mike, my last question to you, and this is for the thousands of people who listen to our conversation. Based on your incredible journey as an entrepreneur and all the stuff that you have done over so many years, what would you say are 3 lessons you would want our viewers and listeners to take away from your journey and our conversation?
Yeah, and you sent me this question, so I had a little bit of time to think about it. And honestly, my first response has to do with shame. When I think about where I have the most shame around businesses, it's the lesson is values first, expertise second. The best employees, the best partners, the best friends share your values, and they're pretty good at their job. They're pretty good in life, but they share values. The worst, most toxic friends and employees often don't share your values, but they're unbelievably good at something. And when I look back at the worst decisions I've made as a business owner, it's by putting up with people or supporting people in my organization that did not share the values of the organization, but they were so good at their jobs that it was, I held on to them too long. Like for example, the salesperson that has your biggest client, man, if we let that person go, we might lose that client, but he's a jackass and he's poison. I wish that I cared more about values all the time and less about expertise. Second one is play to your strengths and hire for your weaknesses. I believe that that God gives us all 52 cards. They're just unevenly distributed. So we all have our talents and we all have our weaknesses. And the sooner that you can recognize your talents and play to those, and then just admit that you're not good at everything and hire someone that is so good at something you are bad at and honor them by saying, you do this, I don't know how to do this, the better leader you'll be. And then finally, I lost my wife to brain cancer 6 months ago.
Well, I'm sorry about that.
Thank you. And she was an amazing, amazing adventure partner and taught me so much, and wonderful mother to our children. And I was deeply in love with her. I have no regrets about our marriage, or our friendship, anything. And I'm so grateful that I had her in my life. I saw a meme the other day. What would you do if you knew you were dying? And then it said, you are dying. Do that today. I think that, the sooner we realize that life is very short, I know it's cliche, but we're all dying a little bit every day.
Correct.
So if you're putting off doing something that you've been wanting to do, please start today. Today is the day to start. That's what
How wonderful. How wonderful. And Mike, on that note, and your 3 amazing lessons, which is put values first, expertise second. Second, you said, was play to your strengths, hire for your weaknesses. Third, thank you for talking to me about the pain you went through 6 months ago when you had a big loss in your life. But you're so right, that we are all dying, and therefore we've got to do that today. And as someone said, the process of dying starts from the day you're born. So thank you so much for talking to me about your incredible journey. Thank you for talking to me about the 3 businesses that you have built: Maddock Douglas, McGuffin Creative Group, Flourish Forums. And thank you for speaking to me about all your 4 books. Thank you again, and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.